Hi everyone, it's Leslie from Colouring and Tangling. I promised you I would do a Greyscale mandala from my new book, Watercolour Greyscale Mandalas, for you. And Jan was asking in the group about colour choices, how difficult it is to make colour choices. I'm not going to cover that too much in this video, but I am going to show you in this particular video and demonstration how I colour Greyscale, just give you some tips, some techniques that I use, and the nature of working with Greyscale, I guess, where the shading has already been done for you. But I think what I see most beginners do in Greyscale is they colour too heavily and they obliterate all the shading that has been done for you, and they completely obliterate that, and they're just a little bit too heavy-handed. So I'm using my favourite watercolour pencils, but in this demo I want to show you, if you don't have watercolours for instance, or you're scared of them, I'm going to show you how to do a section completely dry using whatever colour pencils you enjoy using, your favourite brand. And I'm also going to show you, as they are, as they have been grayscaled from watercolours, it seems appropriate really to use watercolours to colour them. So I'm going to show you how I would do both. Now if you look at the template, I guess the nature of watercolour, because these are from original watercolour art, the nature of watercolour is its transparency. So in the Greyscale you're going to get all these different transparent effects where the colours kind of, that nothing is too heavy, you know, you're seeing some of the lighter colour underneath. So it's very subtle, and the gradations are very, very subtle in this as well. I tried to make the Greyscale not too light and not too dark, but it's kind of tricky getting that fine balance. So the colours that I'm going to use, and I will do another video where I'll chat to you about colour selection. I did put up a post in the Facebook group showing you some apps that are still all alive and active, still running, where you can actually, I think some of them are based on photographs, and they will, from that photograph, they will actually give you a palette. So it's all about working with a colour scheme, and I think any advice, or the first bit of advice I'm going to give you, is don't use too many colours. With mandalas, I agree, it's very difficult to work out where on earth you are going to put the colours, just how adventurous you're going to be. I think less is more in this case, and you've got a repetition happening. For instance, you've got all the flowers going around all exactly the same. So, you know, you really don't want to, unless you love absolute rainbow art, you know, you probably don't want to use too many different colours. So for this example, I'm going to make all of the flowers all the same colour. I'm going to use shades of red for the flowers and yellows for the inside part, and I'm going to then blend down into lilacs and purples. And then I'm going to end up with greens for the leaves, traditional, and I'm going to end up with blues in the centre. So that's what I've decided. That was in the original watercolour art, and if we look really closely at the flowers, you can see the translucent effect that I was telling you about. You've got really light petals, and you've got sort of overshadowing, you've got the petals are sitting on top of each other kind of thing, and you can just see the darker petals underneath. So we have to be guided by the Greyscale. So if I choose a red, I'll just choose this red colour here, and with I'm going to probably do it dry first. I'll do it dry first and be guided by all of this here. So I'm going to do it very, very lightly, really super softly on the section that is very, very pale. So I'm using the Greyscale as a guide, and I'm letting it dictate to me where I do it light and where I do it dark. Now as it comes into the centre, the Greyscale is a little bit darker, so I'm going to do that accordingly. I'm going to put a little bit more pressure, but not too much. Same pencil, same red pencil, and I'm darkening it, so I'm leaning a little bit heavier with my hand, and then I'm merging it out like that, okay? So if we look again at this, the lightest section is over here, so we'll tickle that on. You could use a pinky colour if you wanted to, instead of just the one pencil. You could use a pinky colour on the really, really mega lights. And I'm just going to use the same pencil. And then as it comes into the middle, it's getting a little bit darker, so a little bit more pressure. And then as it gets into the centre of the flower, it's getting even darker still. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to make it darker, and then I'm going to ease that into the light section. Now what I might do to vary that just a little bit is I've got a darker shade of red here in my watercolour pencils. So I'm going to take this, it's more of a purpley red, that one was more of a scarlet red, and I'm going to go back in. I want a little bit more noticeable area of depth in there, so I'm going to go in with this slightly darker crimson red, I guess, and ease that out. Now because we've got one petal behind the other petal, I'm also going to take this up just a little bit, make a little bit of a line, like that, just to suggest that that petal is coming in front, and then go back in again here. We want to make it really light at the edge and darker in at the centre, but I've intensified that line to show that there's one petal coming in front of another petal, if that makes sense. And really that's that little section done. So let's try that again on the second one here. And to vary it a little bit if you want to, we can add, we'll try a little bit of pink on this one. So pink for the light section. Just experimenting. So the beauty of the PDFs is, and you know that that is my favourite way of obtaining a colouring book, because you can actually print out several copies to practice and experiment on. I just think if you get, I'm not criticising colouring books by the way, because I love them, and I love the special quality of feeling you have of, you know, a brand new book and it's all shiny and new, but I think there's that intimidation factor where you're scared that you're going to make a mistake because it's a shiny new book, and it kind of maybe takes away a lot of the joy for some of you because you're very precious about it. So I'm darkening that just a little bit, and then as it comes in here, I'm making it more intense. So these are really subtle. The gradation and the variance of the shading is not dramatic, it's very subtle. And my preference for these personally would be to use watercolour, because they are from original watercolours, and they will you'll get more of a subtlety, I think, perhaps when you put the water on top. We're going to try it anyway. So I'm doing the same thing. I'm trying to hopefully make some of the petals go back by intensifying the shading. So leaning a little bit darker. This is this purpley red now. You see that I'm doing it heavier on this left hand side to make that petal appear to be in front. Okay, that's the process. Really dark down here. Keeping the really light sections light. So that's that little bit done. We'll fire ahead and we'll do another one. Super light at the edge. So don't be too heavy-handed. It's much easier to make it darker later. If you make it dark too early, as you know, it's hard to go back. Super light. Now you don't need to be a slave to the grayscale, and what I mean by that is you don't have to be completely dictated by what you see. You can completely do your own thing with this. The grayscale is there as a guide and will assist you in you building up your tones if that's what you want, but you don't have to. So again, I'm trying to make that petal come behind the other one, and I'm going to flick over now to the scarlety one, the crimson one rather, crimson red, darker in here, and then easing it out. And again I'm going to do that line up here, that shadow behind here, to create the illusion of one petal coming behind another one. Well, that's beginning to look okay. So if you were doing this dry and you haven't got watercolour pencils, that's what you would be doing. You would be looking at where it's really, really light, where it's a little bit into the mid, and then where it gets even darker still. And for the centre of these flowers I'm going to do two shades of yellow. I'm going to do a lemon yellow and a kind of ochre-y yellow. It's more of a mustardy sort of yellow, an orangey yellow. Very minimal shading in this. It's a little bit darker here at the bottom here and a little bit darker just in the edge. So just using the lemon yellow for a starter. I'm going to block that in all over. And actually I'm going to make the whole thing yellow. These little leafy parts as well I'm going to do yellow. And I'm going to use this orange yellow next. And at the edge I'm going to create a little bit of depth. I'm going to keep the middle part light, and at the edge I'm going round in a circular motion because it is a circle centre. So you see that I'm building this up, keeping that middle highlight, keeping that really pale in the middle. Now you can take this even further, and you can maybe even grab a little bit of the red if you want a little bit more depth. Just in the very edge, just to create that little bit of shadow, that little bit of depth in there. Just along the edge, tickling it on. So that's me now getting a little bit of illusion of depth. And these little bits in here, well, they're so tiny, we could probably just do a little flick of the reddy colour just to get that little bit of light and dark effect on there. Just to separate them a little bit. Now I would do all of the flowers all the way around the edge exactly the same if I was finishing this off. So I won't do the whole thing. I will do a couple of these petals down here, and I'll progress and I'll show you how I would colour an entire section. But I think what I'll do is I'll put a little bit of water on this one now. So I've got my watercolour brushes here in various sizes, going from small right up to fat. Choose the appropriate one that you think would work. And I've got my water off camera. I always have a tissue, piece of kitchen roll or a tissue on hand as well, in case I've got too much water on my brush. Now what I do is start with the light and then end up with the dark. So let's try this. What will happen is the colour usually intensifies, it usually gets a little bit stronger, and what you have to be careful of is that you don't want to make your lights too dark. So all that work that you've previously done, you don't want to flood the light with the darker colour, so just be careful. You see that I'm avoiding taking the stronger colour right up to here because I want that to be lighter. You don't need to overdo it, just a little bit of water going on. Same thing, I'm going to start with the light section first. And then take it down into the dark. Now I find I go in different directions, so having done that I'm now going to use my brush going up the way, just to do that final blend. You really don't need to do too much extra work with the water. You've already done all the hard work with your blending. Start with the light, bring it down into the dark, and then I end up going back the other way. That's that little bit done. And then I've just got this little petal behind here. Occasionally off camera, I don't know whether you can see this, I'm just dabbing my brush to get rid of some excess water, that's all. Going back up. So I'm trying to achieve, the objective of this is, having put the water on, I'm still wanting to have light, mid and dark. Cleaning my brush, and we're going to start on the yellow. Start on the light bit on the inside, this little highlight bit. Now I've just overdone the water a little bit there, but it should be okay. So watch you don't put too much water on. And then dragging the dark in. Now really these tiny little bits here, I'm just putting water on and I'm going in a linear sort of direction here. That's all I need to do there. And that's that little section done. So I'll quickly do some more here. We'll start the process again. Very light on the tip of the flowers, super light. Then we go into our mid, intensifying the colour a little bit, heavier pressure. And then as I get into the centre, even more. Now what you don't want to do, because I'm rushing it a little bit, is if you've got wet areas and then you start reworking or doing another section with dry, it can be a little bit difficult, so you probably would not want to do that. You probably want to wait until everything is dry before you tackle another section. I tend to do it all dry first, or at least do one complete flower first, dry, before you put the water on. I'm going to get this deeper crimson one again in the centre. I'm doing the merge. So you'll see that what I was explaining at the start is we don't want to completely obliterate all the grayscale with heavy colour, because otherwise why would you have grayscale in the first place? You're using your grayscale to be guided by where you want to make the variations in tone. So I think a lighter hand is probably required. And just take it in little baby steps. Do the light first, super light, depending on what colours you're using. Obviously the lemons and the yellows are going to be a lot more subtle, they're not going to show up so strongly. So light, and then I'm making it darker in the middle with the same pencil. And I'm doing that line there to show where the different petals are. And then I'm swapping to this deeper, darker red, purpley red, right in the centre, dragging it out. Dragging it out along that edge a little bit. So it goes from dark here into the mid here and light here. Let's try another one. This one is very light over here on the bottom left. Tickling it on, not too strong. Super light here. And it's super light. I'll do these two quickly here. Super light here, very light here. Let's do the whole flower. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to speed up, and it's basically a formula at the end. Okay, starting to make it a little bit darker here. Now the reason I didn't bring out an artist edition of these was difficulty in finding quality watercolour paper that is not going to be exorbitant for you to buy, because let's face it, good quality papers are not cheap. And with watercolour, you really need to have a heavy, minimum 200 GSM. 300 is the best. 300, 200, 300 GSM weight to really withstand all that water that you're going to be adding. This paper that I'm using is a real budget paper. It's cartridge paper, and I guess it's the poor man's watercolour paper. If you're not using a lot of water, you'll get away with cartridge paper. It handles slight wet washes reasonably well without the paper buckling and warping. But if you're going to do a lot of heavy washes, the paper's really not going to work for you unless you use a really heavy, beautiful quality watercolour paper. And it's not cheap, and I just can't seem to get my hands on any for my printer to print onto that's just going to be affordable. So I think with the PDF, again, you are able to choose your art papers and print accordingly. Now my printer that I've got at home, my really nice expensive one, unfortunately has been broken for about a year. And it used to be great. It was brilliant for heavyweight papers. I used to be able to put that in without a problem. And I've got a cheaper printer that I use just for everyday stuff, but it doesn't like thicker quality art papers, and it just spits them out, much to my dismay. So I'm unable to print onto my really nice art papers that I've got. But you could take the PDF file to an art lab, or a print lab rather, or an office supplies place. You can even take your own paper to these places and ask them to try printing it out onto your favourite watercolour paper or art paper that you love, and see if they will do that for you and bind the book for you, and you've got a really nice quality book with quality paper. They'll give you the outcome that you want. So this one is cartridge. It's not even a heavy duty cartridge because my printer doesn't like the heavier one, and it's kind of doing the job okay. I'm not putting too much water on, which is why. Alright, I'm just finishing off these little petals, doing exactly what I suggested before. You can keep building it up, by the way, even after you've put a layer of water on. If you feel you want a little bit more depth on there, you can keep going. And we'll get more water happening on this, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to do the rest of this with the colour scheme. It's coming along nicely. We'll add the water to the remaining petals. Same formula, starting with the light, taking it down into the dark, and sometimes I go the other way and flick it up. Cleaning my brush. Very important, as I keep saying, the main thing you have to watch is you don't want to get all the darks on top of your light. You want to maintain the light. That's the trickiest part of all, probably. I think Copic markers would be really nice for these as well, with the Greyscale. They would work beautifully, but you'd need to print it onto a nicer card, or the Express It card, which is exclusively for the alcohol markers. Alright, that's that flower done. And the next stage is, oh, I forgot to get some greens, but I will do the lilac. I'm going to do this a sort of lilac-y colour. This, you can see the watercolour effect here from the original. It's almost like a sort of tie-dye effect in there. So this bit is super light, and then you've got the variety of the different greys in here. So again, I'm going to be guided by that, and I'm going to start off with super soft pinky purpley colour in here, just in the middle. And the same here. Now it starts to get a little bit darker as we go up. So I'm going to then use a darker, this purple here. Now there's 30 mandalas, 30 designs in the new book, but they're printed onto both white and black backgrounds. And the black ones, the black background really will make the colour pop off the page. So it's nice to have both. You'll get a totally different effect with both of the backgrounds. So I'm now going on to this more of a purpley colour. And let's start underneath the flower, making it a little bit darker. Now that flower is still wet, so that's what I was saying. Try and avoid that, because you won't get a nice effect if you're working onto an area that is wet. You want to make sure it's totally dry before you use your colour dry. That makes sense. So just being guided by the Greyscale. Sometimes it looks a little bit motley because that's what watercolour's like, and it spreads together. There's a little dark patch there. That's a leaf, so I've got to be careful I don't. And you can, oh, so now I'm ripping the. That's what I was really stressing. I'm ripping the paper because I'm doing a dry section next to a wet section, so please avoid doing that. Do it all dry first before you add the water. So this is really, these sections are purples blending into a paler pink. And then here we've got this darker area, and I'll merge it out. I've got to watch because some of these are leaves. And same on the other side. And I'm going to do a blend. I'm going to take that purple out a little bit into the pinky colour. And here there's no shading at all, so we'll leave that. Just leave that the pink. I hope this is beginning to make sense. Okay, so that's that little bit done there. And I need to go and get my greens. I forgot to actually, I'll be back in a second. I'm just going to get some greens to do the leaves. Okay, I'm back with some greens. Sharpen these up a little bit. Okay, I've got 3 shades, which I probably won't use. I might stick to these here. And we will start with the light. So, super light green. I've missed a little bit there, that's background actually, so I can probably get that darker purpley colour again. Where's my darker purpley colour? Here it is. And I missed that little section there. I thought that was a leaf and it's actually background. Okay, so putting on the light green on the leaves, Oh, I'm going to do that blue, so I really made a mistake there. Okay, and then we'll get the dark. This is a darker green. You can do the stem, little, well, not stem, a vein. Do that little vein there. Now again, we want this one to appear to be behind the other one, so a little bit darker here. And then the vein, do the merge. So most of these leaves are darker at the bottom and lighter at the top in the Greyscale. And do these bits here. Once you do one little section, because it's a repeat mandala, you will be able to get more confident, and basically the same technique will be for all of it. Once you get one little area done, which is, so it's good to print one off and do a little practice and get comfortable with them. Some of them are a little bit more complex than others. Some of them are very detailed, others haven't got quite so much detail. You see I'm really building up the tones, making the leaves look real. With the light, just 2 shades of green, that's all it is, really easy, before I put the water on. And if you're not using watercolour pencils, you'll get this effect just as beautifully with your pencils dry. Or Copic markers, or whatever it is you love to use. I'm still afraid of my Copic markers, I'll have to get into them. So I'm just going to do one little section of this whole mandala to show you how they work. So that's that little bit done there. Now I won't put the water on. I'll do the blue section down here first, and then I'll put the water on the remaining parts. Intensifying the light green. So you really should be doing all the hard work in your first layers of using the pencils dry. The water, yes, you're still building the colour, but you've done all the hard work underneath. So the first layer is very important. So that's that little section down there. And I'm now going to do this section of blues. I've got my blues here. Now I'm just going to get an even lighter blue, and I'll sharpen that one up. So I've got this really pale blue here. Okay, make a decision about which ones. It's going to probably be these two. The same, exactly the same again. Now actually, looking at my original watercolour, this one here is green, but again it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You know, this whole section here could all be blue. Oh, I think I will actually just do that. Okay, so same as before. Do the lights first. And in this one, the light is more in the middle of the leaves, and it's dark on the edge. So we'll do the light. And then we'll get the darker blue. this petal is in front, so you can do a little bit of a line in that case. Just soft, and do a little bit of a line to show where that petal comes behind the other one. Like that. And it's really dark in here. And we've got a bit of a line here. Okay, mega dark in here, which our Greyscale is showing us, and then I'm doing that merge, taking it out, back to the other ones. Really dark here. And it's beginning to take shape. Can go back in again with the blue, the light blue, intensify it all. So I like to do the lights first so that I can then really, you'll see I'm darkening this all the time, but I need to know where to make it dark, so I tend to do the darks last because of that. As I say, there's nothing worse than making it too dark too early and you're stuck with it. There's no going back. Well, that's getting a little bit more 3D now in there. So here we want to make sure that this petal stands out a little bit more and we can get the effect of one coming behind the other one. So intensify that, get your darks in there. Now this bit down here is the same, so I'm going to do all of this blue. Might even do it as a base. I'll do this all over. Lightly, because I'm keeping this all blue. So if you do it too dark, you're going to obliterate all of the grayscale. So lightly first, so that you know where to make it darker. And then I'll put the water on this section here. Give you an idea of how it's progressing. Okay, let's get the dark blue. Now you see here it's all fudged together. So we need to start doing our darks to separate the petals. So a strategy here is, if you want to keep it nice and simple, is light at the top of all of these petals and darker in the corner at the bottom, and then ease out the dark up to the top.